Hey, what's going on there? It's me, Bosco. Not like you know who I am or anything, but who cares? Uh, I'm
This is
here
for
with
the
Zach.
archives. This is for the
This is for
archives.
the archives. This probably won't be seen by anybody. Um, most likely. But, so, I don't know. We're gonna talk about Dr. Strangelove. Personal favorite of mine.
Or how I learned to stop worrying and love the
Do you
bomb.
gotta say the whole fucking thing?
Yeah,
No one cares. No
that's
one
the
cares.
subtitle of it.
No one cares about the subtitle. Anyway, uh, yeah, we're gonna talk about that. Directed by Stanley Kubrick.
Mm.
Probably the best director of all time. But I'm biased. He's my favorite. He's my personal favorite. But anyway, I think I don't know. Just watching this again, I'm just like, yeah, this shit could totally fucking happen. I know it's goofy, but I'm like, this shit can fucking happen. I mean, think about it. Just one rogue agent. I mean, I guess there would have to be some doomsday device in place for it to exist.
There's a sense I think in this movie of the mundanity of Armageddon and the doomsday um weapons and whatnot. Um, because like I feel like I think when people think about the doomsday nuclear Armageddon, they probably think like there'd be like some whole complicated process behind it and like all these fail safes and all this like countermeasures and measures, and I guess it's kind of shown in the movie. Like they have all their codes and their top secret stuff and whatnot, and but
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Like the mundane aspects of that. I don't know. When I see this movie, I mean, it's obviously an anti-war movie, right?
is it?
I mean, I think it's just like the inevitability of war.
It definitely feels like a Cold War era piece.
Oh yeah, for
Like
sure. When was this made?
it's a satirical look at like Cold War anxieties, Cold War fears, and how like the eventuality of a doomsday nuclear Armageddon might play out. And
1964. So yeah, that's
that's
pretty
right
in
in
the
the
thick
thick
of the
of it.
Cold
Yeah,
War.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely a movie that plays on like the Cold War fears, but I mean,
Well,
dude,
you hear the president at one part. He says, um, "Man, he's like, I thought I'm the only one who had the authority to do that." You know, he
right?
didn't realize that, like, and then those guys kind of explain to him how there's like this top secret code R
Mm-hmm.
that gives like just this one General Jack D. Ripper, the authority to initiate a nuclear strike and then kind of sever all communication, and basically there's no fail safes for that. You know, so it's like the fear of the Cold War kind of being out of the hands of even your most trusted leaders, and it could come down to one crazy deranged Jack D. Ripper to be like, oh, I feel like we've already been invaded by communism. They've come for our bodily fluids, as he says.
Well, World War One was started by one man.
Was it?
Well, I mean, it was like a collection of things, but like that was like the ignition to the powder
The
keg.
powder keg thing?
Yeah, but yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, it's at the end of the day, it comes down to operator
Operator.
error.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's some of
Well,
those
I'm sure there's great mental health, things, but for people in the active military, I'm sure that there.
there's some of those stories, from the Cold War era of like near calls.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's the famous one that happened in America. There's also a Russian equivalent of this story, although I don't know what the Russian one is. But in America, I don't know, sometime in the 50s or 60s, some guy, they're in this bunker somewhere somewhere, I don't know, and they had seen something come on their radar that like it signaled a nuclear attack. Like they had different levels, and it was like the highest level saying like these are nuclear missiles inbound. America's about to get blown up. And so like they went through the whole process. They got set up like they did in this movie. They got the papers out. They clicked all the buttons. They, removed the fail safes. They were ready. And like it came down to one guy, one random general, and he was standing there. And then he was like, at the very last minute, he was like, "Hold on, this doesn't feel right," and he called it off. And it turned out to be an error. And there's an equivalent story that came out of the Soviet Union after the Cold War ended, where something similar had happened in the Cold War, where a base had a functioning radar thing where they thought nuclear missiles were inbound, and they got ready, and then they're like, never mind, And that's like a prevailing thing that I think is interesting about the Cold War. Is like both sides, the Soviets and the Western powers, stood there, nukes pointed at each other, being like, "I'm not going to do it. Is he going to do it? I'm not going to do it." And they're both, I think, were thinking that collectively in the social conscious of the public, and even up to the highest leaders. I think the prevailing thought was, this is here for our protection, because if they're going to do it, they're crazy. They might do it, but we're not. But we need this in case those crazy people do it. And I think both sides were looking at each other thinking that. And really, what it could have come down to was one rogue operator being like, "Fuck it, I'm done. Yeah. I'm gonna launch an attack and sever communications in my bunker and hold up and let Armageddon spill out onto the world," or whatever.
Like how do you like? Does the humor in this movie make you laugh out loud? Is it laugh out loud humor, or is it like, haha, yeah, humor?
No, yeah, it's definitely not like a quiet laugh out loud humor. Yeah, it's like. Yeah, it's like more of like a subtle humor.
I think you would call it a black humor.
Yeah, and like just the little things, the little juxtapositions. Like we were pointing out in the beginning. Everything there says peace is our profession, and at the end the code to not blow up the world is there's some variation of peace.
POE, peace on earth.
Yeah, our peace on earth, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like that juxtaposition, or the guy in his office, Jack D. Ripper, has that poster that says peace is our profession, and right next to that picture, like you pointed out, is the plane dropping all the bombs, and then when the soldiers are fighting American versus American, it's like, all those signs that say that are getting shot up and blown up and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, hey, Kubrick's the master, dude. He's the master. He's like, he can, there's literally not much he can't do. He can't, like, and this is early on in his, I think personally, like back to that question, I think it is an anti-war film, because I think like the whole point of it is like to be like, look how fucking ridiculous these people are. And you know what? Look, who was the fucking general under Trump? That dude was
they literally called him Mad Dog Master.
Yeah, Mad Dog.
Isn't that a weird nickname to earn?
The guy's name was Buck Turgison, right? And then Jack D. Ripper, but fucking Mad Dog.
And they were on Burpelson Air Force Base. Burpelson.
But it's like, I don't know. I think first off, like, general's like such a weird position. Mm-hmm. Like when you think about it, like, yeah. But, I think, of course, it's a fucking great movie. I can see some people being like, oh, it's dated. But, like, I think someone like that would be fucking wrong.
Why?
It's not fucking... because, like...
the Cold War is past.
The Cold War is past.
I don't think the majority of Americans don't share that anxiety anymore.
But people are still fucking pushing... fucking MSNBC still pushing Russiagate shit like it's fucking... Like, it's still hot.
If nuclear war, I think, still is in the back of the mind of even, younger people, younger Americans, younger people in the world... but like it's not like an immediate threat. Like I think other things have taken.
No, I don't think it's an immediate threat, but you can even see like in our political situations nowadays. I mean, look what's all going on between the U.S. and trying to get the Iran deal back together. Mm-hmm. Probably one of the better things Obama did, right? End of his presidency, and the gall we get out of the fucking Iran deal, and then we get mad at them for like, hey, you guys are stockpiling nuclear arms.
Well, all these countries want nuclear arms as a deterrent, be it North Korea, Iran.
Because we're the bad guy.
And it's like Pakistan and India, they're both nuclear powers.
Because we're the bad guy.
And both those countries have nuclear arms because the other one does. And, it's basically just a deterrent, and I don't think there's any, other than a rogue operator, I don't think there's like a collective government or peoples on Earth that would be like pro-nuclear war. Yeah. Like you'd be hard pressed to find people, but like all these countries, everybody can kind of look at the other and be like, oh, he's gonna do it. When they talk with the Russian ambassador in the film, he's like, well, we built this doomsday machine because we thought you guys had the doomsday machine, and they're like, we don't have a doomsday machine. And
damn,
like,
I wish we had
pretty
one.
sure you guys have a doomsday machine, and then that's when Dr. Strangelove kind of comes on and is like, yes, perhaps a doomsday machine. But
okay, look at this shit. I mean, like, literally, what they were blaming in the beginning is, like, literally the thing that they're feared of. I mean, it was the same during the Red Scare, but the thing they were afraid of the most was fucking communism. Or so-called communism.
Well, tell me what you think about this. What did the general mean when he kept talking about bodily fluids? He mentions that several times
he can't bust, dude. He can't bust,
when
dude.
He's first talking to the British guy.
Well, think about it. The one guy's name is Turgidson, boner, turgid. It's another word for hard. And then at the end, what does it fucking end in? It ends in like, 10 women to every one man in the mines. Okay, we gotta repopulate. At the end of the day, I think what Kubrick's saying is it's literally a fucking dick swinging contest. That's what fucking, what I mean?
There is a lot of weird, like, kind of like subtle sexual like aspects in it, like the general, the one
Dr.
general.
Strangelove, he talks like this, he seems very aroused. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, no, I think a lot of it has to do with getting hard. Like against the guy's like I'm worried that they're gonna take my bodily fluids. The bodily fluids.
And when he writes the letter, he's like I have to do this because communism's spreading and they're coming for our bodily fluids.
You know what's the funny thing? This movie was made in 1964. And they were still talking about fluoride in the water, and that's still something fucking nut jobs still fucking talk about. Yeah. I work with someone who literally he like that's what he talks about. Like he talks like, I don't drink tap water.
Fluoride in the water.
Yeah, dude, that's
been a long time conspiracy theory. That's been a longer one even since Alex Jones first peddled it.
It's still around.
I think there's some truth to it. I think there might be some truth to.
Oh, here we go.
To something like a minuscule amount of fluoride in not a dangerous level.
Yeah.
But this is something. The theory was about it was that it fucks with your brain. So so the governments would put it in the water to make their public dull and more easily manipulated.
No, that's just fucking. That's mainstream media, dog.
Yeah.
That makes you dumb. But yeah, no, I feel you. Yeah. It's weird though, I know. Even though this movie was made in the 60s, I think obviously it still ties to today. I mean, like I said, communism is still one of the that's still like, a Red Scare that still lives on in America. I mean, even just down to, social, democratic policies of, just it all gets lumped under communism. I mean, even fucking Joe Biden's being called he's like trying to usher in the communist left, and I'm just like, it never fucking changes. It never fucking changes.
Well, they think that Joe Biden is a puppet for the socialists.
I wish, but I don't know. I think
Do you think the president in Dr. Strangelove is a socialist? because from the very start, he doesn't want nuclear war. He wants it called back, and he seems oddly enough, because in most films where the president's in
I bet you he was a neolib.
The president is kind of a bumbling buffoon in a lot of films, but in this one he's kind of the voice of reason in a
But
weird
he's
way.
also kind of a bumble, like he kind of bumbles a bit, you know.
How so?
He's a bit of a bumblebutt.
To me, he strikes me as the voice of reason. In this
How so?
the voice of composure.
I don't know,
reason.
just like he's like, all right, yes. Oh, I'm very sorry. Oh, I'm sorrier than you could ever be.
Well, that's when he's talking with which might be the most laugh out loud exchange.
Yeah.
You know, when he's having the exchange with the Russian president Dmitry.
Yeah, you know,
Of course I would just love to call the talk.
Do you think like, okay, this is like kind of like off topic, but like do you think like with like world leaders, like they go like, how come you never call, bro?
You never call.
You never call, bro.
You only call when something's wrong. I'll call the chat. I call the chat, but I had to call now because something's wrong.
Something's wrong.
But sometimes I'll call the chat.
Yeah.
I'll note it. I'll call again next time just to chat. I don't think that makes him a buffoon, though, having that conversation.
No.
I think that just makes him kind of just goofy. And if anything, relatable. I'm trying to think about what is the president, the character in this movie, the role of the president character, is, to me, he does kind of seem like, a more tempered, even-tempered character, and a little bit more, the most weirdly, down to earth, I guess. He's not all wrapped up in all the military jargon and all the military stuff and protocol. He's surrounded by all these generals, right. And plus Dr. Strangelove, but
Okay, but think about this. This could definitely happen. Basically, when they were talking about the Plan R, which was to detonate, what was it, like 400 million megatons or something like that. Like, and it was signed through like an emergency bill. Tell me that doesn't sound like some shit we'd do. We'd sign some bill where like the military gets like extrajudicial powers and fucking, and in times of an emergency.
Well, that does exist.
Yeah.
I've heard of it before. There's a contingency. There's several contingency plans in the U.S. government, the U.S. military. As far as I understand it, like they'll try and rush elected federal officials to different parts, like NORAD's the famous one, under the Colorado Rockies, is that like all high military command will be taken to two separate planes, and the planes will be like heavily fueled and they'll take off, and if America's like, you can't land on America, like the skies would be the safest place during a nuclear Armageddon, so that these planes would just continuously circle the American coastlines, and basically the military would run ground operations and direct what remains of the country from these two plans. Like the military, it comes down to whoever's alive, but top military generals. It is a contingency. They do have contingency plans set up like that,
Yeah.
So of course, like I definitely, of course, I think, weirdly enough, like a lot of stuff in this movie is like, definitely it does exist somewhere in the deeper, darker corners of our military and our government, but, you never expect it to come to light. That's why I think the president's surprised about it. The president kind of representing, people at large, the public at large is kind of like, what? How come I don't know about any of this? How come you guys can just do this? And they don't,
it's a deep state, brother, let me tell you.
Those guys that have the title the Megadeth, whatever, the generals of Megadeth.
Dude, so fucking metal. So metal.
They're kind of, they try and explain it to him, and they're just like, that's just the way it is. That's just the way we set it up to, in order, in event of this. In this event, they literally say, for this eventuality, this is how it's set up.
Right, they expect the worst.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if or they plan for the worst, and their contingency plan basically falls back on them being able to make all the shots and like call all the shots,
Yeah, I hear you. It's kind of like a side note. It's kind of like more of like a, I guess, like, I don't know if you say philosophical, but like, all right, like think about like dropping a nuke, right? I mean, we're basically the only ones that have done it, right?
On another country. On human beings.
Yeah. Like my whole thing is like, if we ever did get into like mass nuclear warfare, right? Like if that became like a reality of life, right? That happened. like, at a certain point, like, I'm like, what's the point? Because it, like, ravaged, like, you know, they were saying there, like, oh, the half-life of thorium is, like, 100 years, you know? It's like, why, like, what's the point if you bomb everything out that it's just a fucking wasteland? Like, you want to live in a fucking wasteland? Like...
Mutually assured destruction.
Right. I mean, that's why the Cold War ended, I guess.
Yeah, and that's why nothing ever happened. I think, because, like I said earlier, like, I think everybody... You know, aside from the rogue operators, I think everybody in their hearts and in their minds knows that's a bad decision. That's a bad call, not just for the sake of humanity, but the sake of yourself. Not just for the, you know, not just for your country or your military or whatever, but like for everything that exists. Like, you know, it's like out of the question, but it's like one of those weird things. It's game theory. You know, it's it's out of the question. Nobody in their right minds even if you're one of the most evil people on earth, you know, most people in their right minds, aside from the few mad dogs, you know, would ever go through with it, you know, because the conclusion's already assured. The conclusion that you know what's gonna happen. You know what's gonna happen. It's the end of the world, essentially.
Well, you know, it's something interesting, just tying it to like current day, like, you know. One of the things Trump ran on was pulling out of, you know, the Middle East, pulling out of, you know, Iraq, pulling out of Afghanistan, you know, and a lot of the times, you know, they would come and they'd be like, okay, we can increase our, you know, our presence there, and, you know, he said, you know, I want to take all the troops out, you know, but like behind the scenes, it was basically the generals were all like basically blocking him from doing it, right? And he like, okay, we'll see if fucking Joe Biden sticks with it, but you know, with what he said, September 11th, right? But you know, and it's just like, I don't know, it makes me think like, man, like how much power do these fucking generals have? You know what I mean?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with.
Well, I don't know. I just don't know. I just think we'll always have senseless wars.
I think a lot of times they still have to answer to the president, as they do in Dr. Strangelove. Like, they still have to answer to the president. They still end up in the war room in the Pentagon. But I think that a lot of times they kind of make executive decisions themselves.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
And then explain their decisions.
Exactly.
Rather than
get the military lawyers to be like, all right, how do we spin this?
Rather than, you know, first consulting with the president, and then, or, you know, the nation at large, you know, would be probably the better move.
Basically, the theme of this movie is that the deep state is bad.
I feel like before a nuclear war should happen, there should be like a quick emergency vote, and the entire population gets to say yes or no, nuclear war. I mean,
well, it's like, it just like shows up on your phone. It's
everybody would get it, and then you vote yes, and then all the people that vote yes, you just be like, why?
You remember, I don't know, it's got me thinking of missile attacks, but you remember, like, it was I'm pretty sure it was during Trump's presidency, but like when there was that missile strike on Hawaii, so called, like, remember, and they were like all alerted, like,
that was when North Korea was having their big old build up.
Yeah, like, just imagine how, I don't know why I keep saying like, because I have a terrible vocabulary, I guess, but like, imagine what it would be like to like be one of those people and be like, oh shit, a bomb's gonna drop. What do you fucking do?
I read a story online that when that happened, I don't know, this was online, so take it with a grain of salt, but that someone saw that come across their screen and they're like, oh my god, the bomb's gonna land in 2 hours, what do I do? And they're all like, and they looked around and the only other person there was their sister. And so, thinking that a nuclear Armageddon was about to destroy Hawaii.
2021 here for you.
And their
2021.
This one's in 20 whatever has happened.
Yeah.
And so they had wild crazy sex for 2 hours.
Oh my god.
And then the alert came down, or however long until the alert came down. And
it seems like that brother was looking for an excuse. He was looking for an excuse.
And said, nope, false alarm.
You know.
So those two had to fuck their respective sibling and thinking that they're about to die in a nuclear holocaust, and then a false alarm comes and says, "Never mind."
I don't.
How awkward do you think it was when that? If that was a true story, and they thought they were gonna die, so they're just like, "Let's get it on." Until we blow up.
Like I said, I think that guy was looking for an excuse. I mean, like, I don't think, like, okay, like, what comes to my mind...
How do you recover from that after the false alarm comes? How do you...
Oh, you kill yourself. You kill yourself. I mean, like, there's no way. Yeah, you gotta. You gotta.
I'm pretty sure I've seen videos, too, of, like, just... I mean, that was just a funny story.
You know what I do? You know what I do? I'd probably go to the zoo and then, like, try to ride a giraffe or something. If they had one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just try to ride the animals.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would just go to the zoo. I don't know why.
I drive around drinking and driving like crazy.
Yeah.
Huffing drugs.
Yeah.
Huffing paint. Drinking gasoline.
Yum.
Driving like crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you're on Hawaii. Where can you go? That's like the worst place to be if you to get a nuclear missiles incoming, because you can't drive far away. Like, you're on an island.
Here's the thing. Back to that story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's homeless people in Hawaii. You couldn't try to go and try to find some homeless girl.
Maybe like 5.
I don't think. Is there any homeless in Hawaii? Maybe.
I don't think it's common to be homeless out in Hawaii.
That'd be pretty rad.
Maybe like beach bum status, I guess. Just surfer dudes that live in vans.
I mean, yeah.
Like active, like you're thinking like San Francisco, Santa Cruz style homeless.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a large population like that in Hawaii.
Well,
how do you get out there? How do you get out? Because homeless people gravitate towards cities. You know, it's Hawaii is like so isolated.
Yeah, they'd have to have enough money for a flight.
You can't hop on the train yet.
Yeah. They swam there.
Yeah. Right.
All right. Well, I think this is a great movie. I mean, look at us. We're already connecting it to all this shit today. It's a must recommend. If you're like,
about nuclear war.
It's about nuclear war. Fascinating.
Thought experiment.
It is. It really is,
Thinking about nuclear war. You ever seen the YouTube video about this game called DEFCON 5? It's another kind of thought experiment about nuclear war, and it basically starts off and it goes through these different levels of DEFCON. I'm like, DEFCON 1 is like building up the military, right? And then DEFCON 2 is like strategically positioning it, and there's other players playing, like everybody's playing against each other. And then DEFCON 3 is like fighting, like ground forces, boots on the ground, whatever. And then DEFCON 4 is like the highest level of military fighting, until finally it reaches DEFCON 5. But everybody in the game, all players have nuclear missiles, but they're locked until DEFCON 5. And when DEFCON 5 hits, everybody launches their missiles and destroys each other, and everybody loses the game every time. There's never a winner in the game. As soon as it gets to DEFCON 5, everybody just launches their missiles like crazy. Yeah. The military studied this game, has used it as a tool for studying, and I've heard, other, people, talk about it too. It's just like, it's just that idea of, mutually assured destruction. There's no winners in nuclear war, And also it comes back to also the other thing I like to think about with nuclear armament, at least, is the idea of game theory, and that's, not explicitly stated in Dr. Strangelove, but it's that idea of like, oh, if X has nuclear weapons and I don't, then I lose. If I have nuclear weapons and X doesn't, then I win and they lose. But at the same time, you got to be aware that your opponent, the X figure, is always thinking the same thing about you. So the end result is always both people have nuclear weapons. And it ends kind of in a stalemate most of the time, or destruction. Right. The only way to win nuclear war is not to play,
Want to play a game.
So...
Want to play a game.
There's no solution to nuclear wars. Just don't do it. And,
don't do it.
Nuclear disarmament is probably the move. Yeah, here's one more random thing. You know, when you were living in Santa Cruz, did you ever see in the 90s sometime there was like a huge anti-nuclear proliferation protest in Santa Cruz? Did you ever see things written on the sidewalk?
Yeah.
About like, it was like scratched into the cement and it was like no nukes and stuff like that. And that statue that's near downtown, near the clock tower, that weird looking one that looks like people like grabbing each other. It's supposed to be, it was a sculpture made by this artist that was supposed to be a family looking up as a nuclear bomb dropped down on them.
Oh,
yeah,
lovely.
Santa Cruz, and there's like this huge, you know, anti-nuclear protest
that's
there
cool.
in the in the late 90s, I think. And you can still see the marks that you know, people were big on that. You know, I think nowadays it's, you know, kind of become a you know, like a back thought for most people, like we're talking about in the beginning. You know, I don't think it's in the forefront of most people's minds. Like, if you went around and asked people political issues they cared about, I don't think nuclear proliferation would be even in the top 10 of the common
Maybe
Americans.
in the early 2000s.
And, I mean, like, even in, you know, we're going back to the past century, the 20th century, you know. You know, I don't think nuclear destruction is, like, even a top 10 concern of most Americans. But, like, you know, they exist, and nuclear weapons are pretty terrifying, and there's no good outcome to nuclear Armageddon. It's everyone, the world is destroyed, and then a few people live and they get 10 women for every man. So that's the win, I guess, if you're the Nazi scientist.
Shit. Well, yeah. Yeah. You got any of that yellow cake, brother? Got that yellow cake?
Yellow cake, but I mean, like, you could just pull up YouTube and throw videos on of nuclear bombs just to see, you know, what it looks like. You ever seen that video?
Well, there's the one that, of course, you know, I first heard on Joe Rogan, because I'm basic as hell, but it was that Robert Oppenheimer one where he's like, I have become death, destroyer of worlds.
Mm-hmm. Well, when they said, I've heard reports similar to when the scientists first watched the first nuclear bombs, like, people were like crying. That's how insane it was to see. There is, and
then the generals were all hard jerking off.
I used to, when I was several years ago, it wasn't even that long, it was a few years ago, I haven't had a dream like this in a long time, but I used to have these string of dreams, right? Where I would be dreaming, doing something random. It wouldn't even be like a nightmare. Well, it would turn into a nightmare, I guess. But like, I would be doing something, looking out a window, walking down the street, and all of a sudden in the distance, I would like see a nuclear explosion. And this was like, there were different dreams that it would happen, and it wasn't always the same dream. It would be like different scenarios in the dream, and I'd be doing something, and all of a sudden in the distance, I'd see like a mushroom cloud rising, and I'd be like, oh my god, there's a nuclear bomb just went off over there.
And then you just went about your day.
Holy shit. No, I would like, it would get fucking scary and I would wake up. And so,
I would just like it if you just like went about your day just like, oh yeah, there's a nuclear explosion.
This went on like over the course of a year, and like and it kind of captivated me for a little bit afterwards. Like I was kind of like had like a little bit of an obsessive you know, spur online and research and whatnot, where I was like looking up, you know, nuclear videos, stuff about radiation, because radiation is also terrifying. But, you know, and I came across a Vice video where it was literally titled, it was, "What does a nuclear bomb explosion feel like?" And they went and they interviewed these old, like, British...
How it feels to chew 5 gum.
Essentially, they went and interviewed these old, like, British officers and whatnot, that when they were doing early nuclear tests, they had this idea that they could nuke a place first and then send in soldiers. Bad idea, but they thought. They thought. And so they wanted to see how, like, you know, having soldiers near a nuclear explosion, how people would react to that. Because, you know, before this was just scientists and
man, who got that shit gig? Who got that shit gig?
They were talking to these guys. Oh, it was a very shit gig, because they were talking to these guys. They're old men at this point. And they were like, they were out on a boat, and they're miles, obviously very far away. They set off a nuclear explosion, and they had them sit down and face away, and they had to like cover their eyes with their hands. And they said it got so bright when the bomb went off that you could open your eyes with your hands still covering your face and see the inside of your body glowing. Like you could see your bones like an X-ray.
That's how X-Men starts,
and
dude.
See blood vessels pumping around. in their body, and they said people started to freak out, and they stood up, and they told them not to stand up until after the shockwave came, and they stood up, and it blew everybody that stood up back like, meters, whatever, and then finally they stood up, and they said, and they're like, okay, look at the explosion, and they got up expecting to see something in the distance, and they got up, and they were like, it was above us. It was so massive. It was like everything in front of us, and it was like the cloud was just like above us, hovering. They're like, I've never seen anything so massive. They said soldiers like broke down, started crying, started freaking out. Some were just in awe, just staring. And they said it was like one of the most incredible sights that they never wish they saw.
Oh yeah.
And
there's like a bit of like a morbid beauty to like a nuclear explosion, like the way they look. There's like just something about it that it's like it's morbid as fuck, but like the explosion itself is beautiful in a way because it's very, it's crazy. It's a crazy thing to fucking launch,
It's massive.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we don't die by a nuclear explosion. That would pretty blow.
It would probably be better to be closer to the epicenter.
Yeah.
That way you could just get vaporized, because dying of radiation poisoning does not sound fun. That's what happened to those soldiers.
So wait, you're telling me I'll turn into vape?
What happened to those soldiers was that later in the interview they said that a lot of them got radiation poisoning.
Yeah, that fucking makes sense. Yeah.
Infertility rates, child defects, birth defects.
No X-Men superpowers.
Nothing cool. No, unfortunately, the real world and real radiation merely just eats away at your cells, and you get cancer, and your children are born with furry hands or something and a club foot.
Nothing fun.
Nothing fun.
Man. Well, I think that's pretty good. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
A little conversation about nuclear
warfare.
For the first
but
podcast.
I think final thoughts for this. You want to go first, Zach?
Final thoughts is I think it's a good movie. I like that it's black and white. And I like that it's kind of has this little bit of an aged effect to it. I think the ideas in it are also, ring true, like we said. The Cold War anxieties and the ideas of nuclear destruction. And the line of chain of command.
Yeah.
And how that stuff works is much more exploitable, much more fragile than I think we realize, and our government is a lot more dysfunctional and uncoordinated than we'd like to believe.
Oh, yeah.
For having doomsday weapons.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a fantastic movie. I think it's probably, obviously The Shining. I think The Shining's my favorite Kubrick movie. But, this one was like one of the ones where I was just like, man, like Kubrick made a piece of satire that still rings true today, and I think that's about what you would hope for when you do satire. So, I think Peter Sellers is awesome. Dual role, and I think I'd definitely recommend it if you haven't seen it.
And you like to think about nuclear destruction?
Yeah, nuclear destruction, yeah. You won't have any nightmares. You'll be completely fine. So I think that about does it. I'm here with Zach. And it's been the Bash Brothers, talking about movies. Tell a friend. Please.
Right on.